the Wonder Boy, your new book out on Luka Doncic. You had to amend it a bit. I'm just wondering about that process, man, with the trade and how has that worked?
Just a bit, just a
yeah,
bit.
So, it really it put a wild, unexpected plot twist of a bow on the end of the book. The book had because the book was about the pressure on a franchise when you draft a prodigy through the prism of Luka. And so much of his first 6 years, there was all kinds of drama and dysfunction and chaos. I mean, and massive missteps, like the KP trade blew up in their face. They completely bungled the Brunson situation, lost their second best player for nothing after a trip to the Western Conference Finals. They ended up having to tank in the immediate aftermath of the Kyrie trade because things went so haywire. And they were so much concerned about, if we can't build a contender around Luka, is he going to look to leave? And I don't think he would ever have searched for reasons, but there was certainly the threat of those reasons slapping him in the face. So this tension, this pressure, all this stuff is the book. And then there's just the wild plot twist at the end where you successfully built the contender. You went to the finals with him averaging 34, 10, and 9 that season. And before the next trade deadline, you get so sick of his bleep that after kissing his butt for 6 years, you stab him in the back and trade him in the middle of the night. I mean, it's wild stuff. So yeah, I had to hustle to write a final chapter. And it comes out March 25th. There are already 8,000 copies printed. Those folks will have to download the final chapter online. But man, could I have asked for a crazier plot twist and better content? And obviously I've been reporting the thing on the story the whole time. I didn't have to do a lot of extra reporting to write the chapter. I just had to get my mind right and settle in and find the time to write it during a crazy time in the NBA and certainly in my professional life. But again, an insane plot twist. But if you look back, there were breadcrumbs that you could, like the conditioning stuff. There's a lot of that in the book. It's been a story throughout his career. And I get the frustration. I don't get the decision. Again, production of pain in the ass ratio, right? Luka's production is historically high. Mm-hmm. There are bigger pains in the ass than Luka Doncic. I can promise you that. And to trade a generational talent before what should be his prime years, when he is looking forward to signing a long-term extension with you that summer, historically unprecedented and not something that I could have stomached doing.
Tim, I got to ask you a question, man. I know there's been a lot of chatter about something maybe being above Nico's pay grade as far as the Mavericks and this whole casino situation and possibly moving the team. Was there anything about that throughout the book with, maybe that being a reason why they wanted to get away from possibly paying Luka's Supermax extension and trying to do something different?
There's a mention of that conspiracy theory, but that's exactly what it was. This was a Nico Harrison decision where he managed up. He managed up and convinced Patrick Dumont why this was the decision that the Mavericks should make. And hey, Patrick Dumont signed off. And now the other massive development that happened that made this trade possible is Mark Cuban sold the franchise, right? Sold the majority share of the franchise. At the time, Cuban told everybody who would listen, hey, I'm still in charge of basketball operations. I've got control of basketball decisions, forevermore is the way he put it. No, he didn't. And if that doesn't happen, there is a 0.0% that Luka is traded. Mark Cuban's top priority for the previous 6 years was trying to make Luka Doncic happy. All he wanted to do was have Luka be the successor to Dirk, the guy who, took the torch from Dirk and spent his entire career in Dallas and, put up awesome numbers and, brought a championship parade to Dallas. It was in Cuban's mind. It wasn't perfect because Dirk's twilight wasn't great, but he through tanking, frankly, through trading up, through some luck, they landed the guy who could take that thing from Dirk and run with it. And once Cuban lost control, They turned around and basically dumped him. Now, there's two criticisms I've gotten when I've talked to a bunch of like people around the league, scouts, executives, etc. One is you just can't trade a guy with that kind of talent at that stage of his career. You just can't do it. Now, there have been people who say, I get wanting to get out of the Luka business because, like obviously the conditioning, blah, blah, blah. Like they can understand that, but what they can't understand is not maximizing the return, which they got Anthony Davis. He's hurt, so we haven't seen him except for 31 minutes. But, dude, the guy's a top 75 all-time player. But for Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, Max Christie, who's a nice young 3-and-D player, and one first-round pick is pennies on the dollar. And they by keeping it secretive, they didn't maximize the return. And frankly, this fear of the Supermax, which was what Nico Harrison had and what he convinced Patrick Dumont to have, kind of talked him up, managed up and hey, it's a bad investment. First of all, the financial ramifications of this trade are going to be nasty. Like butts and seats are going to be much fewer. TV ratings are going down. Merchandise sales.
Aren't they raising ticket sales too? Then they announced that.
Well, yeah, good. Yeah, and by the way, the PR and that's a continuation of some of the messiest PR that I've probably ever seen in my life, and I've covered the Dallas Cowboys. But the Supermax with a player like Luka, if you think you might want to move him, it is a weapon. It's a weapon. You play out this season, maybe he takes you back to the finals. Supermax him. You got to keep him another year. Well, damn, you're going to have one of the best players in the league on your team for another year. He might not talk to you a whole lot, but he also might average like 35, 12, and 12. Who knows? Maybe you go back to the finals. If you still feel at that point next summer like you've got to move on from this guy, like he's, doesn't fit the culture or, the conditions are concerned or where the body's going to break down, he's locked up long term. Call it 4 years because there's probably a player option, whatever. Ask Damian Lillard how much influence a superstar has over his destination if he's locked up with a long-term contract. He wanted to go to MIA. He's in MIL. The letters are similar. The destinations are drastically different. Okay. At that point, you could have put Luka up on the block. Just basically announced to the league, hey, Luka's getting traded before the next training camp. And it would have been an unprecedented bidding war. So I think the decision was premature, and I think the process was extremely flawed. And what you've done, and then the PR has been extraordinarily messy since then. And what they've really done is suck the hope out of a fan base, and not only outrage, but they're certainly at risk of alienating this fan base.